The wind had a mean whistle to it that morning, like it carried old curses in its teeth. It tore through the cottonwoods along the South Platte, rattling loose boards and lifting yellow dust that settled deep into the creases of Evelyn Carter's coat. She walked slow down the dirt road leading away from the train station, shoulders hunched, one suitcase in her hand and a baby on her hip. The other three clung to her skirts, quiet as shadows. She had nowhere left to go. The man at the grain elevator had not even let her finish her sentence before shaking his head and turning away. Same at the grocery. Same with the woman at the church who would not meet her eyes. 4 mouths were too many in times like these. No one said it out loud, but everyone thought it. The town was not cruel, just tired. War had taken the young men. Drought had taken the crops. People like Evelyn, thin and desperate, asking for help when they had nothing to offer back, were a reminder no one wanted. Charity had dried up. Only survival remained. Her boots crunched in the gravel as she walked. Nearly 3 miles passed before the road curved out of town and into wide wheat fields where the wind moved in long silver waves. The suitcase felt heavier with every step. The baby whimpered. Hunger burned in her belly, sharp and steady, but she did not show it. She could not. She had not eaten since the morning before. Just past a ditch, the land rose slightly and the grass grew high and wild. Evelyn crossed it and stopped. She set the suitcase down, then the baby, and lowered herself to the ground. The children gathered close, wordless and pale. Their clothes still smelled of coal smoke and metal from the train. She pulled her knees to her chest and pressed her forehead against them, eyes closed. One thought beat inside her head, hard and steady. Not now. She thought of the house she had left in Kansas, of her husband's silence the morning he walked out. No note. Just his belt missing from the hook and the truck gone from the drive. There had been whispers later, a waitress in Topeka, a card game gone wrong. Evelyn did not care anymore. What mattered was the quiet he left behind and the weight she carried alone now. A diesel truck rumbled up the road. She did not lift her head. It slowed, then stopped. Boots hit the dirt. A man's voice, calm and not unkind, called out and asked if she was all right. She raised her head but said nothing. Her mouth felt dry as cotton. He stepped closer. He was a big man with wide shoulders and a dust-covered hat pulled low. His face looked carved more than grown, weathered by sun and work. He said he did not mean to scare her. He had seen the children and thought maybe someone needed a ride. She nodded once, guarded. The children stared up at him like small deer. He said he had a ranch west of there and was heading back with supplies. His name was Luke Halstead. If she needed somewhere warm for the night, she could come along. Evelyn stood slowly. She picked up the baby, then the suitcase. She did not answer. She just walked toward the truck. He did not rush to help her, only walked beside her, matching her pace. The children climbed in first. She followed. Warmth hit her like a wave and her throat tightened, but she forced it down. Luke climbed into the driver's seat and turned the key. The truck came to life. They drove a long while without speaking. Then, just before the road bent toward the foothills, he asked a single question. "What can you do?" It was not cruel or suspicious, just curious, as if he wanted to know what parts of her were still standing. She glanced at him. She said she could cook, clean, and mend what was torn. She could read and count. She worked fast and did not complain. Then she paused and added that she could hold 4 children in her arms and still chop firewood. He nodded once and said that would do. They did not speak again. When the ranch finally came into view, low buildings set against a sweep of snowy mountains, it felt like something she had dreamed once and forgotten. She did not let herself hope. She watched the light in the windows and listened to the wind sing through the wire fences. She held her children tighter. The bunkhouse was small, 2 rooms, cracked windows, and an old stove in the corner. But it was dry. Luke handed her a ring of keys, told her where the water pump was, and left them alone without questions. That night she sat on the edge of the cot with the baby asleep against her chest. The others were curled together beneath a quilt that smelled of cedar and smoke. She watched their shoulders rise and fall. Sleep did not come. Her hands trembled in her lap. Her mind wandered through the months behind her. The pawned wedding band, the shoes too small for her oldest boy, the time she begged bread behind churches and was turned away with tight smiles. She had done what she had to. She had traded dignity for calories and carried the shame deep in her spine. Now she sat in a stranger's bunkhouse with no money and no promises beyond morning chores. Still, it was the first time in a long while she was not afraid someone would take her children while she slept. She woke before dawn. She tied her hair back with a piece of string and stepped outside where frost clung to the grass like glass. The air smelled of animals and cold iron. Luke was already in the barn lifting feed sacks. She told him to show her where to start. He asked if she knew horses. She said not much, and even less about cattle. He said then they would start with chickens. He showed her how to rake the coop and how to hold the feed bucket so the birds did not swarm. She watched his hands closely. He worked with purpose and without waste. When she stumbled, he showed her again and stepped back. He did not scold. They worked most of the day side by side. The children stayed close, gathering eggs and whispering to goats. When her youngest fell in the mud and cried, Luke handed him a carrot and said there was no shame in getting dirty. The world had worse things. By dusk, she was worn down to the bone, but it was an honest tired. Luke left a pot of stew on the stoop with bread and a note about fixing a fence the next day. She held the note for a long time before setting it down. That night the stars were brighter than she remembered. The wind had gone still. She did not cry, but something tight inside her loosened. For the first time in a long while, she thought maybe one day at a time might be enough. The fence near the orchard ran crooked along a stretch of land that sloped just enough to feel uneasy underfoot. It had been patched too many times with borrowed boards and rusted wire, leaning like a tired man who refused to lie down. Evelyn stood there with a hammer in one hand and cold wind in her mouth. Luke pointed to a rotted post near the middle and said if they did not fix it, the cows would find a way through and make trouble for weeks. He handed her a glove with one finger missing. She pulled it on without comment. She held the post while he drove it into the ground. When the wire slipped, she steadied it. When her grip failed, he caught it without a word. She noticed a deep scar at the base of his thumb. Old. She did not ask. He did not explain. At noon, they sat beneath a twisted apple tree at the edge of the orchard. Luke opened a tin of beans and passed it to her first. She hesitated, then took it. He said his brother used to call that kind of meal cowboy caviar. When she asked about his brother, he said he fell off a roof years back and went fast. He said it plain, without bitterness. It made grief feel less like a hole and more like a weight you carried. He never asked about her husband. He talked about the land instead, how it came to him piece by piece after his father died, how the orchard used to be full before the frost ruined it 3 springs in a row, how he nearly sold the ranch 5 times but never did. Some things just stick to your bones, he said. She understood. That night she found her oldest boy sitting up with a torn book in his lap, sounding out words slowly. Luke had given it to him and said there was a whole shelf more. She kissed her son's head and felt something soften in her chest. The next morning, Luke brought her a second coat and said it was too small for him. She thanked him. He said she had been good help. It was not much, but it warmed her more than the coat. Days fell into rhythm. Work at sunup, rest at noon, supper shared quiet. The children followed Luke like he was a steady tree. He showed them how to calm a horse and carry a feed bucket. Evelyn watched with a strange ache in her throat. One evening she stayed to help close the barn. When it was done, she asked why he stopped for them that first day. He said he saw her boy wave at the truck, a small thing that reminded him of someone. That was all. By spring, the valley softened. Green crept back into the fields. Calves were born late, and Evelyn helped with 3 of them, calm and steady. The bunkhouse smelled of bread and soap now. The children laughed more. Luke brought small gifts. She thanked him every time, though it never felt enough. Still, people in town did not quite look her in the eye. She heard whispers. Luke heard them too, but never changed. One night she told him what they said. He answered simply that she had not ruined anything. She had brought life into a quiet place. Summer brought harder work. Then a letter came from Kansas, delivered by a deputy. Her husband wanted the children back. He claimed she abandoned him. Evelyn folded the letter and hid it, but Luke saw her face and read it. He asked if it was true. She told him the truth. He said she would need someone on her side. A lawyer came days later and laid the facts bare. Without proof, it was her word against her husband's, unless there was a legal home. Unless she was married. The wind slapped the porch door as the weight of that word settled. Evelyn stepped outside, shaking. Luke followed later and told her he was not asking out of duty or fear. He said he would stand beside her either way. She took his hand and felt the difference between rescue and choice. They married quiet and plain. The children stood close. When Evelyn said yes, her voice did not shake. The hearing came in June. Her husband sat smug and distant. Luke spoke steady about the life Evelyn built. Evelyn told the truth in clear words. When it ended, the judge said she would consider. They drove home under a wide sky. Weeks later, the letter came. Custody was denied. Guardianship granted to Evelyn Halstead. Life did not suddenly change, but it eased. Luke built shelves for her books and carved her name into the wood. The children called him Pa without being told. Evelyn lifted her face to the sun and let herself belong. By fall, the orchard bore a few apples. She boiled them down and made pie. Luke said it smelled like something worth staying alive for. Winter came hard, but the house was ready. One morning she felt a flutter low in her belly. Weeks later, she told Luke. He held her like he understood the weight of new hope. Spring returned. The baby came in August, a girl they named Clara. Evelyn felt peace settle in her bones. Years passed, steady and full. One evening, Luke asked if she ever thought of leaving. She said no, because she finally knew the world might let her stay. The woman no one would hire had been asked one question, and that question had built a life. Winter settled deep over the valley that year, the kind that pressed down hard and stayed. Snow buried the fence lines and turned the road into a pale ribbon that disappeared by noon each day. The wind howled through the gaps in the shutters. But the house held. Wood was stacked high. The pantry was full enough. Boots were lined neatly by the door, some patched, some handed down, all warm. Evelyn had never known this kind of quiet before. Not the empty quiet of fear, but a full one built from effort and care. She moved through the house with purpose, lists tucked into her apron, flour dusting her hands. She no longer waited for things to fall apart. She met each day head-on. Luke noticed changes she did not mention. The way she tired faster. The way she paused sometimes, one hand resting low on her belly. He said nothing until, one night she took his hand and placed it there herself. He froze, then breathed out slow, like a man who had been holding his breath a long time. He did not speak right away. When he did, his voice was careful and full. They let the news settle between them, not with fear, but respect. He carved a tiny pair of wooden boots and hung them above the fireplace. He said they were just in case. Evelyn smiled and let herself believe that the future could stretch farther than she once thought. By spring, the snow pulled back into the hills. The orchard bloomed thin but brave. The town held its first barn dance in years. Luke did not want to go. Too many eyes, he said. Evelyn told him to let them look. She wore her best blue dress. Luke wore a clean shirt and boots shined by the children. They danced once. That was enough. People smiled at them. Some even waved. The world did not end. It softened. The baby came on a warm August morning. The light was gold and the valley hummed with insects. Evelyn leaned against the table when the first pain came, breathed through it steady. Luke came running from the barn and nodded once when he saw her face. The midwife arrived in time. The labor was long but not cruel. Evelyn bore it the way she had borne everything else, with grit and quiet strength. When the baby arrived, she did not cry right away. She blinked up at Evelyn calm and wide-eyed. A girl, Luke said, holding her like a miracle he never thought to ask for. They named her Clara. Life filled in around them. The children adored their sister. Luke built a crib with flowers carved into the sides. The town softened more. People waved. Neighbors asked for help. The past stopped mattering. Years passed. The orchard grew fuller. The children grew strong and kind. Evelyn found her old suitcase in the loft one day and closed it for good. She did not need it anymore. One evening, Luke asked if she ever thought of leaving. She told him no. Because she finally knew what it felt like to stay, she leaned into him and watched the light fade. A home stood behind them, a life built slow and honest. Evelyn smiled, knowing this was not the end. It was the beginning of another story.